Welcome those who came to our planning and zoning tonight, March 20th. Let's start off with roll call. We have Rand Bagley. Say here.
Here.
That way when people hear your voice, they on that thing, they know it was you. Or try to.
Okay.
Nancy Bender.
Here.
Eric Larson.
Here.
Steve Timothy's here. And Chris Squire.
Here.
And Lynn is not.
Lynn said he wasn't able to make it,
Okay.
so he's excused after he let us know.
Okay.
And we have one vacancy. So.
Okay. All right. Let's jump right into it and review our minutes from our last meeting. Did anybody see any changes that needed made to that? I didn't.
I didn't see anything.
Okay, do you have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve the minutes from Nancy,
I'll second.
second from Chris. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Move right into it. Land use map discussion. A lot of junk. Black and white.
Even with the colors, you can't really tell
Well,
the overlays.
Ryan would pull that up for me.
I will.
Last time we met, we talked about this meeting, I would have a proposed land use map. Can you zoom out a little bit? All right, this is what we have proposed. This blue line right here.
And Chuck, you just make sure you talk loud enough to be recorded.
Okay, that's a challenge for me, but I'll do my best. Okay, this blue line is our build-out annexation boundary. This yellow line, as you guys are aware, is the Roosevelt City municipal boundary. And, where's our legend? We have it on there.
Do you have one?
Probably not. It's okay. I can make sense of it. All of this out here, with the exception of a few tweaks I made here and there, we're getting from the county as far as manufacturing and residential, very low residential areas. Now, their commercial area, and that's this light blue, parallel in Highway 40. It was more of a straight line, but I made it follow the creek there. And then up here, they had this yellow as manufacturing, and we've got within the city boundary a residential right here. And so I made this change in order to follow that little contour of that hill right there. Kind of just a geographical feature, a good place to stop it sometimes. Right here, this is Pole Line Road. This is an RR1. It's R16, right, Dean?
Yes.
This is an R16. We talked about before changing everything south of Pole Line to a very low density. So that's why that's hatched like that. And I also, this is a change I need to make, and you guys can tell me yes or no if you agree, but this that's outside of the municipal boundary, I want to change these to be green, which is very low density. So everything south of Pole Line is the green color. And then right up here, this is a residential, this is a residential, and this is a residential, and the color just are, that's just based on the density, but.
That's the Neola Highway, isn't it?
Yes. Making this change to be a office and residential zone, so it kind of matches this one.
And we recently changed this side of the highway to be RR1.
Which
Was it
highway?
recent of Neil Highway?
Here.
Yeah.
I think on top of Page Bench, right?
Well,
Up
from
north.
the highway up,
Right, north.
yeah, like where Clark lives, all that. That was recently changed to RR1.
There was some
Couple
of
of
it that
years
was
ago.
offset. So I know we fixed some, I know we fixed the lens offset there. And we had some down there that was,
There's a couple pieces.
there was a couple of pieces up there.
Yeah,
But this would allow for residential as well as allowing as the commercial goes. Now, this isn't necessarily have to be changed as far as
no,
new ordinance change. But master plan, we're trying to identify what is it in the 40 or 50 year? And where should it be over time? And we say, hey, maybe we know where we want to go. This is what we're willing to change today, but this is what we expect it to be in the future. And so that then we can at least look and say, hey, based on where we expect this to go over time, this is where we think it needs to be zoned eventually. And maybe that's not immediately, but maybe that's what, anyway.
And I welcome any comments, and you have their contact information and they have mine. So if there's anything that you guys want to see or have any ideas or input,
So this puts professional office goes up. If there's any of these colors you want us to look at, and you're curious about particular areas, some of that.
yeah, and things like these, which these weird little commercial and industrial areas out in residential agriculture, which is now the county zone. I just got from their zoning.
Yeah.
I don't know why, maybe that guy's got a shop or something. I don't know the reason why, but I'm not sure, not a big deal, but that's just explaining why those are just down in the middle of nowhere.
So I had a question on the south of, Pole Lane Road there, in there. You were saying low density, what is it now? Because it looks to me like
There's
there's,
an R16 where the hash
not all
mark
of it,
is.
because there's two different colors in there, isn't there?
So this currently, this area there is an R16. He's proposing this to change to an R1.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
low density now.
Lower density. When he's talking lower density, that's something that matches county, city, Ballard, kind of matches our, we have our own little wording, but that
What's
takes
the
away the
dark-
wording.
What's the dark pink then?
the one
What's in between
that,
that one?
that's
This one?
future loaded.
That's low density.
But I want, like I said,
I think that's county now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Right.
That's what I mean, that's
So
still,
they're low
that's not
density.
in yet.
It's not in yet, and a lot of it's not in. But that would be similar to a R120 or an RR1, so that if they did annex in, we understand what we expect it to be. So when we get these annexation requests, we say, oh, what do you want to be? Well, we're looking and saying, well, the whole annexation area, this is what we expect the whole annexation area will be. So when they come in, we already know, we already have that expectation. So it's kind of helping us to,
What did we zone the very south end of State Street where they were planning on doing that development?
That's still an R16.
It's R16? I thought we had to go bigger.
Well,
I thought they
the
had.
zone is an R16, but they required, Department of Health, if I remember right.
It was to get
permit,
some-
they had to have an acre.
Okay,
They had to have a full acre. They proposed smaller.
so we
It
didn't
is zoned
rezone, we just
R16.
left it.
the zoning is the same, but they
They had
have.
to have the.
Right, so
Okay.
changing it to this kind of a zone would force that, until there's a sewer system in it, probably would have a low density zoning, an R1 kind of zone.
like I mentioned below, Paul, on these, that and then that one, could you close that for me, Ryan?
This one,
And just imagine that. The pole line, that'll be green to match this, it's very low density.
The difference between low density and very low density, are we talking like acre lot versus 5 acre lot kind of thing, or what?
so the lowest density that we have is 1 acre lots.
Okay.
In the county, they would have that very low density. Ours, we only get to a low density zoning. We don't have a very low density right?
Yeah.
Because we don't have something that is that
Okay.
far within inside of the city. We just don't zone that far.
And we should mention on those R1s, we still have more than 1 acre. Bagnite has 50 acres. It can be more than 1 acre, but just not less than. It's like the R16 at Huckleberry. That's the minimum of 6,000 square feet, but they had to have 1 acre to be able to have septic for Tri-County. And that's why it ended up being.
And
Like we have
typically,
one lot that's 10 acres because it would sustain only one septic system.
typically on these land use maps, you see a zone map and it'll be C2, C1, R16, and it'll be specific what the zoning is, but the land use for the general plan, we just call out the densities because it gives you more flexibility down the road when something comes in and you want to decide what it needs to be, so. You're not pinned to a certain exact zone.
Any
That's-
chance, this is just because I'm kind of a numbers guy, any chance we could actually see the acres of each of those zones?
Like how many acres in the whole colored area?
Just how many acres per zone? Well, not zone necessarily, but
For density, I'll bet there is a
Category.
good GIS guy could tell you that right off the bat.
Yeah.
I know we could get it, right?
Yeah.
Well, Derek, we could get the answer, we could get you the answer.
I'm
Well,
just curious.
X amount of
if you go in the
commercial
county,
Yeah,
yes,
X amount
like
of commercial acres, X amount of residential, et cetera. And then we can just, I mean, I don't know if that would be useful to the city council as far as, hey, we're really low on this area, maybe we need to change some of this to.
So one of the other items that will happen with this master plan, this particular spot is how the zoning looks. There will be an affordable housing portion of that plan. In that plan, as I understand, it will identify, okay, how much is in each different, category of housing and how much is there a need for those. And so we also have some of those things, but yeah, knowing how many acres in each one or different lots, we'd eventually like to find out how much versus what's built, what's not, so that we know what is our balance of inventory for lots. So that's another thing we're looking at, but this particular one will be really on the zoning of it. But you're absolutely, we want to get there.
So you're saying,
And something to know in the county, their minimum is 1 acre, and that's where culinary water is available. Other than that, it's 2, 2.5, and 5 acre lots in their low density areas in the county, which is totally different from us. It's just something to be aware of.
yeah, this is just future land use, this annexation boundary, I've been with lots of kicking and screaming and fighting to even get a lot of this annexed, but if you're talking about this green area saying this is 1 acre lots, right? Or are you talking about the whole acreage?
I'm just saying, how much of that is low residential? How much of that is commercial? How much is?
Total acres.
What percentage of total
Yeah.
acres?
How many acres that is, right?
As a whole,
That,
I don't
that's
want
the
it to
green
be-
next to
I don't
it.
know that I want you to.
So how many acres is all green?
So if we could take all of commercial and we could filter by all commercial and say, okay, how many acres
This number.
is amassed inside of it? Yeah.
I'm just curious about that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably.
Let's see if Derek can do that. I'll bet he can. I'll bet we can get that figured.
I don't look at all the here picture, but.
On here, didn't you say, Jeff, like the little white spot within the green where it was agriculture, but that was something that the county had, was a manufacturing area or something right there? The little white spot, let's say in that upper green area above the code, didn't you say that white spot was something that was going on?
That's
in the
commercial,
county?
so I don't,
They have its own commercial for whatever.
yeah, that's
Whatever it
just.
is out there.
But that will be good for us if we're annexing out and things are going, then we know what the grandfather rules are too. Saying, oh, well, if that was zoned commercial, when it comes into the city and we zone it something else, we at least know it was zoned that way and it could come through as a grandfather under that zoning. So that also helps us. So, and just to kind of talk about a few things that we would like to make sure that you understand and are on the same page with us as. So we're looking and saying, okay, the highway comes through, highway should be commercial. I think we all agree to that.
Yeah.
Okay. The other one is we have another highway. What should it be? At this point, we're saying, okay, that other highway is professional office. Should it be commercial? That's really the planning zoning, critical mandated by law for you to have a good, solid discussion of this. This is one of the prime responsibilities of planning and zoning is to identify and work this map. So our proposal and what we've previously seen is, okay, professional office residential is working its way out on this highway. Works, makes sense. If this puts State Street as that same professional office residential. So if we kind of say, okay, well, where is commercial development going to grow? Is that commercial development going to grow towards the hospital? Should it be commercial between Highway 40 and L&L intersection and the hospital? Maybe that's a commercial corridor. And then maybe it changes. So that's something to consider. You know, where do you want that transition to occur? Where do we think it'll happen? You know, do we need to have a commercial area outside of our highways? Is there something that says, hey, you know what? 8 South is going to be a fairly busy road. When that gets brought in, is 8 South on the other side of 600 East? Should that be commercial development? And do we want to reserve that for commercial rather than residential? So there's possibilities, just throwing things out, trying to get you to start thinking about what would you look at? What areas should be discussed? You know, we look at manufacturing, and this is light manufacturing, right?
M1? Where?
Yeah. So that's into heavy. So this is our heaviest manufacturing. Is there somewhere else that we should be planning for manufacturing? If this fills up, if we are out of space there, and our vision is to be the energy hub, which would bring in industrial, do we have enough area identified for that in the future? Because once residential hits there, industrial isn't going to come. This is the discussion that we're looking to have from the group.
I think that might be where it would come in handy to know how much of it's already in use. Because, I mean, that chunk right there, that looks great, but if 3/4 of it's already in use and full, then that would tell me we need more.
Right.
Whereas if only a small portion of it was already in use, maybe we're good for a while.
Right. And that's something we need to have there, you know, identify for us is what we have utilized and what we don't.
And actually, Brian, as you have the new zoning map, when you go to that, doesn't it overlay and show what is what in our different zones? Because the parcels come out and it has U's in them. So if you go to our current zoning map, I believe you can look through it and come up with what is actually being used and what's not, because a lot of the parcels, you can actually go and identify who owns what.
Well, we can, if you identify it by individual parcel, that would be a great deal of time, but there's other ways that we can identify what the size of the building is, if there is a building, versus if there isn't.
There is
There can do those.
We even just a percentage number saying we have this blocked out as commercial and 30% of it is already used, is already has something built on it, and the other 70% is
Vacant.
vacant and, you know, can be in the future, something like that even would give us a good basis of
Right.
how much more do we need.
I mentioned too, and if you have questions, you can go look at it in those zones. I mean, it's gonna be hard for Horace to present all of them.
I don't think it'll be hard to do.
Well,
They can
that's
do a
gonna take
percentage, they can't show every individual, but you can go look at it if you have questions.
We have to do that to design our master plan. We need to know which parcels are in use and which ones aren't. That's gonna take more time than just saying, all right, this existing manufacturing zone is this many acres, and our future manufacturing zone is this many acres. We have to identify which parcels are used and which ones aren't. That'll take more time.
Is the airport in this manufacturing zone we're
The
talking
the
about?
airport is in here, that's correct, yes.
So we're,
And one thing to know, it's an M2, but anything that's an M1 can pretty much be in that same zone.
So let me pull
M2
out,
is just heavier than M1, but it would still allow M1 in that zone.
so here's what we have as our zoning. This is our current zoning map. This is how we have things zoned.
You can almost see on there what's used and what isn't, almost.
Yeah, you can see some of that.
third to half.
I think you can get a pretty good idea, just.
But I think with some analysis, I'll bet Derek can do it. I'm pretty confident. But we have, quite a bit of space. But these lots out here, just so you're aware, when they were platted, they were platted as residential lots.
That's not Bondsville, you're not talking.
No,
not
no,
over-
Bondsville is down over here.
Further down,
Yeah.
on the other side.
So, because Bondsville's on the other side of the highway, down in this area.
Is there residential in them?
No,
Or were they just planted?
they're just platted that way. So, but that's one of the things, so when somebody comes to plat, because we'll have somebody come in and ask for a lot split, and they're looking to change a plat. That's why those come to you, is when they come to you and you say, hey, this doesn't fit what the zoning will eventually be, or, hey, why don't we have a road here? Because we expect this to be commercial, or whatever. So we're just trying to help. I think this process will really proceed there. But we say, okay, we have a RR1 right in the middle of heavy zoning here. This is our most dense zone, and this is our most residential zone. Now we know why.
We don't want to change that.
I understand that, but is this one the right one? I mean, do those right next to each other, is that really what the plan should be? Should there be some kind of phase? Maybe not.
Like something else in between the two.
Right, maybe it phases into something that's a little less than, because at that point, immediately across the street from Gales Acres, are you ready to have a high-rise apartment somewhere else? What's that?
Not that,
No, but
but in the future.
at that point, we're talking 50 years.
Yeah.
I don't set life expectancy on anybody, but do you expect to own it, in 50 years? Maybe me not.
You're really talking to me? No,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
So that,
Probably at 20 years.
well, like I said, I don't put life expectancy on anybody, but eventually, there isn't anybody in this city that owned it when it was platted. When it was originally platted, there's nobody that still owns that parcel. And that's a full turnover within the life of our city already. We've had a complete turnover of property. Ballard can't say that. But we can. But it comes to that, so do we really expect that immediately across from you is a 18 unit building per, that's a huge amount of lots per acre. When you have we have one for an acre or more. That's a huge,
But you do also have State Street running through the middle of that, which changes the dynamic because State Street is a major, and then will become more so major road through there.
Yep.
Which creates more of a division than just a side street.
but I'm just posing questions.
Yeah.
I'm looking for you guys to give me information on what you want. So, anyway, and then, okay, RM to 18. This is 800 South. So at this point, we have an RM 18, and then we have the Gulch as an RR1, and then RM 18 again, across the Gulch. Well, like I said, so are we wanting commercial? We're wanting that to be densely residential. What is it? What should it be? Before it's built, this is the time to kind of,
Is that green stripe right there just the Gulch?
That's the east
That's
side of
it?
500
pretty
east.
close, yeah. Yeah, that's,
And a lot of
500
those,
East is not very far off the Gulch.
their backyard is the Gulch.
yeah, exactly. That's what we're talking about.
And a lot of them aren't even actually an acre long, you know.
No, it's pretty.
Should it be-
right there.
Should it be something less? Not that it changes the person's current use,
Just
But-
changes the future.
but the future use, should that allow for large, dense housing along there?
So what would we be talking about on the alternative? What would it allow and what would it restrict? If we go to more dense, and
More dense
are we
requires,
restricting
so an
chickens in the
RR1,
yard or?
you can't put a fourplex in an RR1. Because you can only have one residential per acre. You could take and put 4 houses inside of one lot if you had an R16. So that's 4 times the density, right? If you have an R118, that's 18 times the density that this one can have. That's a huge difference.
I was thinking, yeah, let's just make it all consistent, but high-rise apartments next to the Gulch. I don't wanna do that.
Although,
Why, but
what if the Gulch becomes, what if it becomes a lake? Because we could put a dam in at 800 South. We could dam that off and now it becomes a lake. Now you put in a walking park. Is it gonna be individual houses now, or is it gonna be high-rise apartments with a fishing pond and a walking path and condos in the back?
Do you want it designated?
You want it that way. I mean, outside of the residents, because we've got a survey out for the residents that really that is about saying, hey, do they believe there should be more or less housing for certain things? More of this or less of this? So we're asking the public, we've got about 160, 170 responses. But we want to come get some of your input, really get you thinking about this one, because this is the primary, as far as planning goes, this is the primary job of planning and zoning to tell us and say, what's wrong on this map for the next 20 years? What is wrong? It comes to the question, when we rezoned right here to residential, I mean, at that point, we got rezoned to residential, it's gonna be a house for the next 70 years. It has taken your commercial and converted it to a house for the next 70 years.
Is that Winterton?
Yes. Good, bad, or ugly, I don't know, but if that's what we want there, then let's change it and let it there. I mean, and this isn't necessarily about changing it, this is about suggestions of what it should look like over the next period of time.
Makes sense.
So when they do come and request a rezone, we say, that doesn't fit the plan.
Does that mean that maybe we should have two maps? One that says what it is and one that says what we would potentially like it to be? Because you don't necessarily want to go around
That
the
is
city
exactly
and
what we're
change
talking
everything right now.
That's what we have. That's what we have. This is the current, and this is what we're looking for from you to say, yep, that's the other map. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Those diagonal lines are the changes within the current zoning.
So those are ones, do we make those changes now? Do we leave and say, these are what we recommend, so that if somebody comes and asks for a zoning change, we say, yeah, that's fine, we'll zone that different, but this is what we want it to zone.
What needs to happen in the future is we need to be looking at our master plan map in addition to our current zoning when somebody comes.
We need to
With,
look
with
at both.
those, and
Absolutely.
I know we've all failed at looking at that, because you don't think about it.
Well, because it hasn't been digitized like
Right,
this before.
right.
This
And
is
so
our first attempt to get it
So it's
really
hard to-
digitized.
Hard to know, oh, this is what somebody 10 years ago planned,
Right,
and now here we are way off of that, you know?
right.
So are we looking for formal suggestions or anything right now, or we're just starting to think
It's
down that?
discussion, so if you, I mean, you don't have to make motions, but we'd say, hey, you know, give Chuck some real
Okay.
meat, because the minute you leave here, we know that none of you are really gonna send him an email to tell him what to change. Although that's a good way for him to get out of it and me to go home. But we're really asking and saying, tell us, what do you think? I mean, you've lived here, all of you have lived here for several years. I'm not sure which one has the least number of years, but even Eric has 6, 7,
6.5, yeah.
okay? And I know you have more than that.
Oh, yeah.
I know you have a lot more than that. I know you do. And I know how many Ren has. And that's more than that. 10?
I'm about to.
Yeah. So, anyway, so at that point, we're saying, hey, you got years of this. You've been here. You know the city, at least to a point. Is there anything that we say, that just isn't zoned right?
So let me throw out, going back to this dense manufacturing, is it manufacturing, industrial, is that the same thing? Okay.
Well, let's change that. You have industrial zone, then you have M1, and then you have M2.
So whichever we do, that
Or
orange,
M2 is an industrial zone.
that purple rectangle where the airport's
Yeah,
at.
we have no industrial zone.
Okay. Well,
I
M1
suggest we move that
M2, I guess.
north a quarter mile, so.
But M1 is like a lot of, in an M1, that's M2 is conditional.
This
But when you go
this
to
was-
M2, everything is M1, that's why. Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
That's what the yellow is.
industrial,
the yellow is potential
it's the industrial part.
Potential.
manufacturing.
Manufacturing,
I thought that was
or kind of,
different.
for
than-
potential, that's what's kind of.
Okay.
Currently, it's residential with the county.
Which one were you saying? Sorry.
So I'm going back to
Go
this.
back to the
master
other one.
plan one. The yellow
The
above
yellow
the,
is manufacturing.
so that's,
Manufacturing, so,
Currently, it's
So that would be an
residential
M1,
with the
M2
county.
okay.
But by
Some
saying
of it.
manufacturing now, it could be commercial in the future, or when it annexes in, or, that kind of leaves it open to either one of those, commercial or manufacturing, correct?
well, this one is telling us that we're looking for manufacturing or industrial. This one, we're saying we're looking for commercial. So which one
Yeah,
is it?
Okay.
Which one
that's
is
what I
it?
meant, that's what I meant.
Okay,
I said the wrong word.
Yellow now.
Manufacturing or
manufacturing
industrial.
or industrial, that's kind of.
Yeah, that's what I mean, that yellow leaves both of those options open.
Those are,
Manufacturing or industrial.
those are
for the
through it.
future.
Is also, they're together.
So green.
We don't have an actual industrial
Right
zone,
then.
that's manufacturing.
Okay, so I like that yellow.
In the county now, that's where they have their chemical, verdict cement and paving.
Maybe not
Areas,
quite
that's
so
kind
far,
of why
but
that zone would stay kind of into. If you remember, we actually zoned that little, part there that burns below, 2 parcels as an M2.
up here. Yeah, put this.
So what about the little green triangle between the two yellow at the end of the commercial? Does that make any sense?
Nope. What green shot?
So the very end of the blue.
There's a lot of them. Tell me which field you're talking about here.
So
Right at the end of the blue,
right at the end of the blue, go up, down and to the left.
end of the blue.
So we're talking Iowa Lane here.
Okay.
So now north of Iowa, there's a little green triangle, go back to the right and up a little bit.
That,
Right above the
Straight up
blue.
all the way up, cut that green triangle.
You're talking about the one that's touching the blue, correct?
I'll show you.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, this green triangle right
Yeah,
there.
this right here.
Yeah.
What's there that we would want residential and not make that yellow? Is there?
right,
Right
now, the
That's
county.
coming straight
that's
from the
low
county.
density.
Okay.
That's low
So that's we're
density
just
housing.
copying the county.
That's where the county has it, but we may not want it that way when it comes to us.
Right.
We may say, oh, yeah, you think it's residential, we want it to be.
That's just north of the Ioka turnoff right there.
True, but like I mentioned, following the
Keep
creek
that yellow.
there,
Where's the Ioka?
their zoning was not out that far, but I expanded it to the south to hit that.
So it should be hashed. Should be hashed.
Well, no,
Because it can change.
the only change is in your current boundary.
Oh, okay.
Anything outside of there, I followed theirs as a guideline, but I.
Yeah, so you'd have
there.
Well, because there's things, I mean, like you have that little tiny yellow triangle right there that should be blue in my mind. Unless there's something
Unless
there
there's
right
something
there.
right there.
That'd be way more.
Is that where WE is?
Yeah,
Are they out that far?
yeah,
And I would imagine that's why it's yellow.
that's why it's yellow, because he's made that actually.
W.E. Bonneville,
Yeah,
there's
there's
several,
commercial.
several commercial.
But you can see from this, you say, huh, we really
Well, you
probably,
can still make it blue.
you can still make it blue.
And he's fine, because
He's
he's already
fine.
there.
Right, but nothing else will come that way and
Because
if he
it's right
doesn't
in the middle
continue
of
it
a
for
bunch
a
of
year.
commercial.
But, I mean, obviously, if it became annexed, and, I mean, we talk about a lot of what ifs, but you're right. That's exactly the point that we're looking at.
Well, that's what
What
we're
doesn't
looking for,
fit.
is stuff that doesn't
fit.
match, doesn't flow,
Right.
that's all by itself.
And maybe some point they zoned it that way because of political pressure to do so, and we say, that doesn't really make sense, long-term, which really should be this. Let's plan for that and hope that when it comes in, we have an ability to annex it in, put the zoning to that, and eventually make it turn there.
And that little green triangle you're talking about, we're calling it very low density, future residential, but
I'd
not a
suggest-
lot there. I
Yeah.
mean, does it make sense to make that
I
blue?
would make it yellow or blue. But, so right now, Johnson Water has their office there. Propane, First Call Propane has their office
And
there.
those are commercial ones, right?
So
So it probably makes sense to make it blue.
commercial or yellow, maybe somewhere in between yellow or blue.
Yellow is the industrial park, kind of an idea, and
Which is.
I think with the X amount of Iowa Lane, because when you get further back, and that's in, like Ross's, he's got his ground. I mean, they've tried to sub that already. Housing was growing great guns, that would be broken up more. They've already got 2 houses in there with plans for more. So if we're gonna zone, let's say Iowa Lane, I think we wanna look at the perimeters, what they have now as industrial and commercial bordering the road to X amount going out, and then past that, it's either gonna be an R1, low density housing.
does that make sense? There's something up the Idaho land on both sides of Idaho 20, it's a busy road.
Tell me what.
This is
in ours. So what is,
a little brown triangle there.
That's a manufacturing one.
no, not the yellow, the one in our zoning. When you zoom in on his, it's a different color, like it's a low.
Oh,
density.
Oh,
I
I
know
know
what
what it is,
That is-
That's multi-cam right there.
Oh, okay, so it's,
Oh, no, this is Dan Karen's.
that's Dan Karen.
That's Dan Karen's property.
back behind his tire shop,
Right,
or Chevron did, okay.
right. Is that, I mean, it's manufacturing on there, but is that really what he's considered? Question. He's not really manufacturing, is he?
Well, his back shop,
The
so
Chevron.
Dan's back shop, so you got Dan's tire, you can see it this way, and then there's that one right behind it.
Right, I think it's a truck. It's a back of it.
Right here, these shops here, Dan has storage in one, and then, they put trucks together and stuff.
All right. In that back.
And the other one, the very back one of his, he's putting trucks, like putting flatbeds on for different companies.
So that's counted as manufacturing? I have to look. So that brings up another.
I'm just wondering why that one is manufacturing when it's all, the rest of it, right, there's.
Good question. And what's happening there now can still happen, even though we say, we really think it ought to eventually be
Commercial or
whatever.
whatever.
Yeah, there's lots of little things like that, like
And that
if you turn the other one on,
different auto out kind of thing.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense the way it is
you
right now.
see right there, there's a little teeny blue inside the yellow. And then there's another yellow, should that be blue, you know?
Yeah. And that's where the county is, but like, where that one's, where Dan's is in our boundary already. I mean, that's just one that kind of, why did they do what they did?
The only thing I guess is when they created that parcel and started developing, it must have come to zoning and they gave them that.
Yeah.
So that's what.
That's what I'm missing. Now, it's interesting with zoning, and you will find that we will have people who will come with our manufacturer, the M2 and M1 zones. The interesting thing with those zones, we are fairly general in, a house inside of residential, and this is the size of lot. But inside of your manufacturing zone, it says A, B, C, and it will tell you exactly the type of business, like, animal hospital, veterinarian, it'll tell you, list exactly the business type, rather than residential or professional office. In professional office, we don't list, every single one, we have kind of groups. But you'll find inside of there is very specific, and that's specific, so as we read it, we say, oh, which business do you have? And if they say, oh, it's none of those, then it's not allowed. If they say, oh, it's this one, then we look to the side and say, okay, is it permitted, conditional use, or not allowed? And you have to look through a table, and it's 7-9 pages long. It's a long one. So at some point, we're gonna come back and say, we really think you ought to revise that, rather than having it so detailed with the type of business. Broaden and say, what does manufacturing mean? What should be allowed in a manufacturing zone? Should it be X? Should it be Y? And can we have a more broad understanding of what that means, rather than say, oh, we haven't been asked that one, so now we have to change the law to allow conditional use or not allow. That's a fairly arduous process, and we get some of those requests, and it's like, well, we couldn't even fathom that one going there, but is it okay? Probably. Or, oh, no, we don't want that one there. But we really need to work through that zoning issues. So that's another day's topic, but we ought to consider what that means, and because we have some pretty arduous language in our code there. All right, so have we captured some of those? What do you think? Other changes?
I want to redo this to have this one be blue, this yellow, and that blue, just to be, not blue. pieces out in the middle of nowhere. Are you guys okay with that? Is there anything else you see that, do we want to, is that worth being a low density zone right next to this big one?
Well, not next to, in the middle of.
Yeah, middle of.
You know, right in the middle of it, that really shouldn't be.
Yes, you have the gulch on the one end, but it's still.
How much
Or the,
But does the gulch,
is anything still?
to Chris's prior point, does the gulch change the nature of those lots enough that they should be allowed to be similar to his? Because State Street is a fairly big change, and so is 8 South. That divides that area, creates a cancer from the ground. Is the gulch that way? Is it substantial in difference in use to justify the
Well,
substantial?
not only is it
difference?
now, but will it be in the future?
Exactly.
Because aren't we
So
still talking about converting at least part of the gulch into like a walking park or something? Will it go down that far?
Discuss,
Or will it be on the
yeah,
other side?
it will be that entire length almost.
Well,
Change those places.
This
Right. on those lines, you can see what Ballard has done
down.
along the gulch. That OS is open space. Do we want to designate an open space corridor in there where there is nothing developed right now?
how far north is this island we're talking about? Does that include the home
I
parks?
think it
or-
goes to, I think it goes to about 700.
So how far north?
I thought it went
You're
wrong.
talking 400.
Oh, it goes further north, now it ends at 700 south and goes north up to
It's
around.
just under the trading park,
Okay.
Yeah,
just short of the
So
trading
we'll
park.
update just a little
And
bit
Beth,
north.
and it's the house,
Councilman
two
Bear.
houses up from.
I think it starts at 700 south, goes south.
So I'm.
And it goes to 800 south.
800 south.
It matches, so the bottom of it is 800 south.
And so the townhomes just to the south of 800,
Or in
that's the
18.
definition of R118. That's what we're talking about. It's high density.
Yes. Yes.
So maybe,
At least part of that piece needs to just,
Or is
if not the
this,
whole thing.
should this be an R110? Oh, well, that's the high school right there, but the one below it. What should this one be? The high school, it doesn't really matter what you zone it.
Yeah. It's allowed.
Because it's allowed in any of the zones, so it doesn't really matter.
But I'd like to show it just as a institutional thing on the general, plan, just so it stands out.
But
so,
I don't know that this should be an RM18.
Right.
This is, and it makes sense up here. But once you got to the south of the high school, you really want residential maybe around the high school.
Yep.
And so maybe it's a little bit more, less dense. Maybe it's an R16, R110. I would guess an R16, but I'd move it to, that's,
Well, and if you look at doing
you know,
that,
idea
so
that's
you
the same zone that Red is in. Is an
make that an
R16.
R16, you should do the one below it too. And maybe change the R1 to an R16, so the whole piece there is the same.
so
Or is there a page? I mean, really, the R1 is a really
Didn't you
allowing
have,
horses and cattle and.
didn't you have
So
a
what's-
medium density?
So R1 to R16 at the Gulch, would that
yeah.
change in real life?
Use, animals. So that's one of the big ones. These lots probably aren't going to be changed because they're not wide enough for splitting a lot. So the use would probably be, hey, you can't have a horse there. You can't have cows. You could still have a goat or, something, chickens, goats, baby, but you can't have larger animals there.
Then I would certainly. put
On
it
the R1?
R16.
R1, well, if you change it to R16 or R110.
If you change it, they can't, but everybody that has it now is grandfathered in.
Right.
But you're still moving towards that in the future.
I would-
Because if you're wanting to make that gulch
Take a step.
a walking path, do you want animals there or do you not want animals there?
See, I think an R110 down here, you know, that brings it back from the R1, or R1, brings it back from that, puts it 10,000 square foot lots. But at that point, the usage still is allowing some animals, but not large
And a
animals.
lot of people there want them, just like people at Gales Acres wanted to change so they could go back to an R1. So it's gonna be a fight when that goes to a public hearing, I can already tell you. Because here we've had people come in and can't, we're zoned that way, they are allowed.
Sure, but we're talking master plan and not what rezone. We're not actually rezoning anything. We're talking master plan, where should it go? Where should it be in the
I would
And on
suggest
the other side of the gulch, Chuck has a medium density area, and I kind of like the idea of the area south of the high school as a medium density, would allow an R120, R110, R16, and when they come and develop, then we can fine tune it. Rather than high density and or low of medium density type.
So you're talking about, okay, let me,
It's the brown area just south of the high school. There.
changing that to R16.
I would do it a medium density. And
That's what you have, that's medium.
But you would,
I thought you said it was high density.
no, you
Well-
would say,
Take the purple further.
The other map was the piece above,
it's
it's
the blue,
purple.
it's that.
Here, that blue and half.
Because the high school is not that whole
Yeah, so you
piece.
can write that.
High school's in an R.
The bottom.
What you're saying is move that pink, is that what you're saying, up to the high school?
Instead of being,
Because what I've got south of it is.
Yeah.
This is medium, and that's high. You're saying move this line up to,
Yeah, because the high school ends up in here, isn't it?
right,
Yeah,
I'm saying
I
just
would put
move
the
this
medium
color up
density
this way.
there rather than high density.
I would take the purple
I
north
mean,
and
they
maybe
can always change.
incorporate the gulch into the median.
And like I said, with changing it within the zone, we're basically saying what it needs to be. But outside of that, medium density could cover R1, R16, or not R11, but R16 and R110.
Yeah.
So you have some.
Yeah,
okay, well, then let's, did you catch that? We're gonna move this line up to the high school.
Yep.
and I would,
And
And then I would say
Take
take
this
that
one.
piece and put into it,
yeah, make
include
that
it as
purple.
medium
that
density.
medium density.
I like that.
The RR1 that's right here.
That one?
Move it into
Make
this.
it purple with the rest.
make it medium density as well.
Mhm.
That, the brown color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Let's
think we-
change this to R18, RM18.
Everything's already built there. Good luck with that.
Anything else?
I think we need to look at like Ballard does and have designated open space. You know,
What do you mean designated open
see how they
space?
have the gulch that's.
Oh, yeah.
The green offshoot.
Green
You know, where we could say, look,
squiggle down through there.
we have this that we want to kind of keep open. You know, like the gulch going from State Street to Fifth East, we don't want people building right up to it. We want to have a buffer around it, you know, and that gulch-
Maybe in that area, it just stays open space by default. because
Right.
You can't do anything.
Right, but
It might be the,
but I think it'd be good to designate it.
To show up.
you know, that would be an interesting one to add the open space as a corridor around where our walking park that we're talking about. Have it zoned as open space. all the way.
Because the one concern that I would think of, you have to be careful with open space is if you just designate someplace as open space, does it then become basically abandoned piece of property that nobody takes care of?
Or it becomes a park.
That's what I mean, though, you gotta, just randomly saying, well, this will be open space, you kinda gotta look at it first and say, if we make this open space, is anybody gonna take care of it, and who will they be? So that it doesn't just become, cause right now, the gulch is a pretty major problem through the middle of town, because it's.
Arguably, a lot of people that own property in the Gulch don't agree with you.
But I work right next to it, that's a problem.
Well, you take care of your piece better than anybody else will take care of their piece.
So,
We replant trees all the time because the beaver comes in and cuts them down. But I'm more mean that around, there's a lot of high school kids down in that gulch that we do chase off because they're down in there smoking or whatever else.
And they moved your direction because they kind of cleaned up right below the high school fence. That's why they're down in your area.
Well, I think putting it open space around, with what do we figure, 10, 15 feet on both sides of that would be, if we had a trail, that's what it would require. So for about 15 feet on both sides of,
I think it'd just be good to help visualize.
then it kind of just preserves that space, at least master plan side, it
Right.
preserves it.
Right.
We're not rezoning this particular time. We may come back and say, okay, now what's the next step? And now that we have a master plan, what steps should we now take? Well, let's look at that 20 to 30 year out, keep that in mind.
Hey, where were you, the walking path around the park, where is that?
No, around the city.
Oh. Around the city, like,
But weren't you talking about going like from Lagoon down to 800 South there, kind of a walking path in that area, kind of projected?
I can show you,
Yeah.
I can show you what we're talking about, all the way around the cove and everything of where we would have a potential walking trail. Because where we think there's going to be a walking trail, we ought to
Just
identify as,
Yeah, identify.
as open space.
okay, if you give me that, I'll make that change.
another quick question.
I thought it sent you the KMZ file.
I think you did.
It's a KMZ file, so just to keep you where we're at. Okay,
Just trying to make sure I understand the colors right. So that brownish square is Gales Acres, right? There's a funky looking triangle below that.
Which is Dale Tribe.
which is still
That's Dill Tribe, and that's currently city.
Right.
So
That we made our own.
that would be the same color as this reddish color below, right?
Right.
It's just low
Low
density.
low density, right?
So
But it's
master
county
plan,
rather
that
than
weird
city.
triangle fits with
Yeah.
the neighborhood.
Yeah, because that would still.
That's all low density, okay?
Right, so they would be the same. The reason they're different colors
It's just
is
annexed
county
out.
versus city.
And I'm not gonna suggest a change there, because that fits. Did we talk about the brown and yellow,
Yeah, we did.
making them blue on the master plan?
Yeah, we got that.
Okay, so I think
That's all right.
that's a good next step.
Okay, well, we'll work on that.
All right.
You got a lot to get done. That was great. That was a good hour.
But
That's great.
that's what we want.
Okay.
Office residential going up the yellow highway, I'm comfortable with that. I don't see commercial going that way.
No. All right,
All right, now we should talk about the next one.
with this part, now we move on to our airport protection ordinance.
Okay, I appreciate your input.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
And we're ready to sit down. Take good. So what we are looking at is we have, obviously have there, but if you need to head off. This is my way. So we are looking and saying, okay, we have an airport. And in that airport, there is hazards when a plane comes in. And based on that plane, there needs to be some protection. If something is over a certain height, and that is on our glide slope or our path into land, becomes a problem. We can't build, this formulates some of that. FAA is gonna require certain things. They require us to have a plan and do some of these things. We can have minor adjustments to it, but really, this is the recommended, what we should be considering. So our glide, we have a 7 and 2.5, and so you'll see that as that glide slope comes in, it is more critical and lower, that nothing builds there. As it goes farther out, it gets higher and higher. But anywhere in here has some effect of saying there is potential that planes will be low flying in this area. You imagine if you come out here, you come around, you have, the traffic pattern, and in order to do that, a plane will come in, come through a traffic pattern and come around and land. And so that's why it is as far out as it is, and it gives that idea. Dean can give us, Dean is a pilot, he can give us great detail if you'd like to put him on the spot.
Is this just height requirements or are there other factors?
What's that?
Is that just height requirement or is there other factors?
There is other factors. So there is some other factors, but largely, I don't know whether you had in your packet,
Yeah.
it has kind of the
Proposed ordinance.
proposed ordinance.
I started reading it and then had to.
And the thing you should,
Anything else?
one thing you should know, where Ryan was talking about these exclusionary zones on both ends of the runway, when we have issued building permits in the past, actually in our master plan from the airport engineers, it shows this stepped area about heights and areas. So when we've issued any building permits in that area, we've had to look at their height on that in the past, but we're creating an ordinance to help protect the airport over time. Because what happens is people move in and they say, we don't want an airport here anymore. Well, the airport is there. It was there first and it's there to stay. And I think this is some way to help that too. To try to,
Does this make room for any future expansion
Of the airport.
of the airport?
So our big expansion of the airport is a taxiway. That would, we're not going to have a longer runway. We already have,
We're kind of already to where.
6,500 feet.
So
That was my question, whether that was going to be an issue or.
we already
we're
have
kind of already there.
6,500 feet. We can land a jet there. We can land I don't know, a fairly good size
That's what
jet.
G4, that they have planes there now that are landing,
So-
that are heavier than the runway can allow.
Yeah, the size of the jet isn't a problem, as far as the length of the runway. Our current problem is the weight limit of that road. If we put too much weight on it and you hit that 90 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, and if Dean hits it, we may not have the strength for that. But we're redoing that. So this year, the runway will be all redone. We'll bring that category up from
From 12,000 to 30,000.
30,000. So at that point, we'll do a lot of that. The next one is a parallel. So that right now, a pilot has to come, land, clear the runway before somebody else can land. Or if they're taking off, and that's really the bigger one, is when they take off, they have to come onto the runway, taxi all the way down to the end, turn around and take off. So that creates a lot of time and traffic that's on the runway that isn't landing or takeoff time. A taxiway will take that off, and the traffic between that we currently have on the runway gets reduced because we pull that traffic off, and just landing and takeoff traffic ends up on the runway. Taxiing traffic doesn't. So we take that off. That will be our next one. We hope to get that done this year too. So, but it'll cost us $9 million or approximately to get all of it put in. So one, just to kind of go through, red is one, only airport use activities. Nothing else is allowed in the red one. It's property that we own, so nobody should be building there anyway, because we have to own the land. We have it restricted, and so that restriction there. Two is the orange. It restricts public places, churches, schools, colleges, hospitals, office buildings, shopping centers, those kind of things. We don't expect them to build there anyway. Inner 2, 3 is the light here. Prohibits land use within this zone, schools, residential, hospitals. We don't expect any of that there anyway, right? This one here becomes for, prohibited uses, low-density residential, places of public assembly such as churches, schools, office buildings, shopping centers, similar concentrations, only low-density residential. So now you can have low-density residential. We might have some back this direction, but, and I think we have some back farther.
Prohibited land uses within this zone are low-density residential. Only low-density residential are allowed, which is it?
Yeah.
Only low density.
You just prohibited it, but you allowed it.
Yeah, our high density
So, yeah, that should be.
zones are, within this are high density residential and only low density. Oh, perfect, good job. Thank you for that catch. It's good. I'd rather catch it now than catch it once we've codified it.
Yeah.
5 is the green.
You skipped the blue.
Blue here.
Only 1, 2. That's on 6.
Oh, yeah. Because there's really only height restriction, that's only airspace restrictions, so we're only talking
There.
right. So blue is the 6.
Another question.
Yep.
Potential typo.
Yep.
On zone 4 and zone 6.
Okay.
Says, residential area should have the disclosure statement included in chapter XX.010. That is XX.100 is your disclosure, right? Your last page.
Oh, yeah.
So both of those would need
Yes.
switched.
Moving 6.
4 and 6.
Okay, great. Great. So 5 is a darker green. That's just around it. So there's nothing gonna happen in there. And that takes us to 6. Zone 6 is the blue. And that's where it's starting to reach out. And it has prohibited land use within this zone are schools, hospitals, and other uses with similar concentration of people. Low density residential are allowed, residential should have the disclosure. So we have residential, we have commercial, which doesn't look like it's a problem. Just hospitals, schools, we don't want a school out here. So if a school has to be inside of Stonegate, we wouldn't allow that. That would be one that would be a prohibited. So anyway, kind of gives you an idea.
What are the height restrictions? Are they done by like how many levels you can have on something, or is it done in feet?
It's done in feet. It's done in feet, and it's just like it shows. It shows the triangles and go out. What it is, you got a glide slope when you come in. And so as you get close to the airport, the height is restricted more. The further you get out, the height.
But what is that number?
We'd have to.
Looking at that one,
Hasn't been decided yet.
One thing to know, the oil wells that have drilled in that area have to have to make an application to FAA for approval before they could drill, just because of their heights. They had to get, there's a specific form they have to file with the FAA and get approval.
So it says in the height limitations, it's the XX.050 approach zone, slope outward for each foot to upward 34:1, beginning at the end of, and at the same elevation as the primary surface. So it starts at the end of the runway and goes out at a slope of 34:1.
34 over 1 up. in feet.
And maybe one thing to know also, we have a Pacific special GPS type landing approach now for our airport that comes in on this right-hand side. The old criteria is they had to have 800 feet of visibility. Now with this, it's 250 feet of visibility. And that's another reason we're restricting this height. And Vernal doesn't have it because of their terrain, but we have it on this one end, which makes us, when everything's stocked in, where the larger aircraft can come into our airport to use it.
But it can still land.
Right. And that's something that just come, actually, the FAA flies it once a year. They don't even land, they just zoom through and off they go, but it's quite something to have one of these.
And to give you an idea, here's the airspace height limitations. So we have primary here, so it's any height. It's here, it's transitional. So we can't go, transitional is a 7-to-1 slope from the airport, and it slopes to 7-to-1, 35-to-1 here, 7-to-1, and 150 feet on the horizontal, which is the green. So 150 feet of the airport elevation. So things in this area can only be built to 150 feet. Interesting to note that our fire engine
Doesn't reach that.
we don't want anything above that anyway. So, and then this one is,
And that's up at the airport.
what's that?
And so that's at 5,326 feet.
Right.
And so if there's a hill there, you have to take into that.
Yeah,
account, you
yeah.
know.
That's right. Correct.
And so if it's coming, that green doesn't get quite to the bench, does it, on the south?
Oh, no. No, the bench is.
Bench is a little further, okay,
Bench is down.
okay. So maybe that's how you have to look at it too.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
At the little.
Yeah.
At the edge.
The airport elevation, or at a height of 5,326 feet. Let's see what so anyway, give you an idea. And then this yellow one, slope 20 feet outward for each foot, up for 20-to-1, for 4,000 feet beginning at the peripheral of the zone, of the horizontal zone. 5,526 feet. So it does have height restrictions there. Plane would be at 6,100 feet at that point. So we're talking, they're only within 500-600 feet of the house at that point. So we don't want those two things to intersect.
6,100 is at higher altitude. That's recommended altitude for planes to come in and start their approach.
That's what planes would be flying in this area. 61.
Is that for all size, like in the small,
Is that for all sizes?
for all sizes
Yes,
of the
ma'am.
plane?
Yeah. Every airport has, usually it's 1,000 feet above runway. Right when you come in for approach and start your approach and do your square to come in land. And so most of the time it's 1,000 feet above grade. One end of our runway is 5,150, the other end is 5,200. Down on the west end is 52, the other end is 51.
The next step in this is to get any of your input and then to take it to a public hearing. So you guys have taken it to a public hearing. So that's what we're looking at. We wanted to introduce it. There's a lot of complexity here before we took it to a public hearing and just said, oh, hey, surprise. We said, this is a good one to come and bring to you so you know what it is and if you're okay.
So one quick question I have. The purple, is that the existing property that the airport runs, owns now? And the purple?
No, that's
We own part of the blue
We own part of it.
running in there. Something to know in that particular area, that's actually where the plane is. If they're losing power or something, I'm gonna give you a case in point.
We own red.
We own the red.
We didn't have
And there, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Vernal Airport, where it has, I think it's 500 that runs across the north end of it. There's that open field right across from the runway that doesn't have a building, there's building both sides. I actually know the person, the pilot. This is about 8 years ago. He actually came in a plane that was known for vapor locking. It actually vapor locked, and he had to sit down that field. He made it down that field, and they had to go in with a tug, a tractor, and to drag him out of that field. If there had been a building there, there would have been a fire or dead people. So sometimes you want to look at building in these areas because things can happen.
Yeah, in the red zones, we have to own, FAA requires to own that buffer, and so we own that, so zoning it to restriction, we already have it, so we're not gonna go there. So, but anyway, yes, so we hope Dean doesn't land.
Dean doesn't want to.
Dean, if you have to, our road should hold your plane. If you have to do our vertical.
Well, we have a saying
Still
about
has-
pilots that have had a disaster. There's ones that have, and there's ones that will.
Mhm.
Well, I'm one of the ones that have, and it's not a lot of fun, so.
Well, both of us are in the have, and so
That's correct.
we're both in the haves, and so we don't need any more. So, all right, any questions?
There is not any current issues in any of these areas, is
I'm
there?
not aware of any. So we don't have to worry about
Would
that.
you be sending a disclosure to all the property owners as far as the residential current, or is that?
No, this isn't,
Or is
this
that-
isn't, this is
that
an
would be a
overlay on
disclosure.
zoning. So
Right,
this is a-
but where it says you have to have those disclosures for the residentials, is that only when
a
the property
building
sales?
residential.
And so once this gets approved, if somebody in that stone
If
gets
they subdivide, if a subdivider divides, then they'll have to
disclosed,
disclose it.
What about, drones? Is that factored into this?
So drones have an FAA requirement of what they can and what they can't do. And we have on our airport website, or we will have on our airport website, discussion of what you can do and answer those questions.
And how close you can be to an airport and all that stuff?
That FAA tells you where you can or can't do that. This is land use, not drone use. So,
Well, the only reason I ask is because there's residential inside. So I mean, somebody could be out in their yard.
If they're flying a drone,
but
they should
but
be in
that's,
the know.
they're using airspace, not a building.
So it's
Building
a different, addressed in a different area, that's what you're saying.
This is land use of what a building can do. There is already set rules what a drone can do, and they can't enter certain airspace.
Yeah, there's a height restriction and everything else around airports, just because you can't see them.
They're not supposed to go over 400 feet. And be a certain, they're, I think it's 3 miles or something from an airport, they shouldn't be.
So is that something, say somebody comes into the outer, whatever parts of this and wants to put in a subdivision, is that something that gets, how do we make sure that people are notified of that when they want to buy a house in there?
These restrictions?
Both. Because if you're gonna buy a house in there, shouldn't you be told, well, that's great, but
If you buy a drone, if you fly a drone, you are required to know what rules fit that
so
drone.
they notify on the drone end instead of on the.
The drone, you should have certain, you as a pilot of a drone have a requirement to know where you can fly that or not. Just like you as a driver of a car are responsible for knowing where you can drive that or not. That is, as part of your ownership and as a pilot of a drone, you are responsible for that. If you enter the airspace that you are prohibited, just as if you enter, as a car, if you enter space that you're restricted, there are consequences.
And you're just like a pilot of airplane, you're required to know. But I think your question is, if somebody was to subdivide this, you bought the subdivision, what do you know? If it's in the city, I would say we were required in the covenants. We would as part of that subdivision.
The
Like
other
every
thing is-
homeowner, in the know. I thought that's what you
As
said.
we have a building permit will come, and our building official needs to enforce this. So that's where it will be enforced, is when the
That
building official
answers my
comes.
question.
Yeah.
Says,
That was what I was meaning. Somebody moves in from out of the
our building
Basin.
official,
and they want to buy a house in there somewhere.
the house is already built, it's not an issue, but when somebody goes to build, now they're building at that point, and they need to obey the restrictions that are there by a building permit.
And when we do this, we're gonna have to make the county aware of it too, because a lot of this is.
Because a lot of that is county.
Right, we'll need the county to adopt the same rules, so that we have a protection zone around it.
Yeah.
Best practice, we're moving to best practice, the required, not yet required, but the FAA is definitely on their pursuit.
And that should say douche.
Yeah,
Not doing
That's-
that.
you're right.
The FAA has changed a lot of requirements on airports ever since 9/11.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is with that. They used to allow you to live on airports, put in apartments and hangars. They no longer allow that. That's all gone down.
So, other questions about what we're looking at? Are you guys prepared to take it to a public hearing? That's what the motion, if there's a motion, that would be the motion.
With the
So
little changes I saw, yeah.
if we were to find other typo type deals, there's still time to
Yeah.
change
Yes.
that,
Yes, so
Well-
just because we hold a public hearing doesn't mean
right?
that
So
it's done yet. We
I
can change
haven't read
it.
this at all, but I liked the map, so.
Are there restrictions as far as, this is just something that I ran into in one of my situations, as far as trees in residential zones? Is that addressed in here, or does that need to be addressed in there?
Yeah, so when we do a master plan, when we do evaluations of airspace, we identify, that's one thing that we are identifying as a city, if there is trees or something that is growing within that. We can either require it to be trimmed below that height, or if that's not the case, then we notice the airmen of that hazard. And that would show up in their flight equipment. So we could notice it that way if it's not taken care of, but we would look to take care of it if it got there.
How far out you have to be for a tree to not be an issue?
So it's height,
It's the same
it's the same height.
Just like a building.
Because I mean, there are some trees that can be 100 feet tall.
Well, you just have to look at it as.
You don't want to wait
triangle off
till it's
the
100
ground.
feet
You got-
tall to tell
got the
people.
ground,
So
you got-
so if it's planted in here, it's 100 feet tall, it's a problem. But we're not gonna plant any trees in there.
I'm just saying, once you get out to the residential areas, are you far enough out that any tree is gonna be okay?
Any trees gonna be out here, the yellow area,
Flat around it. If it were,
the yellow area might
If
be.
there was a ridge,
yeah.
that would be different.
Yes, yes.
If the airport were built in a little bowl,
They would be out of that
and
zone.
something
That would be
happened to
the
the
problem.
side, you'd have more issues.
Right, you would, and then if that's the case, you would shrink this down so that you constricted it, but then you would restrict what that is to the pilot too, and
Yeah.
say, hey, you have to do certain things, and there's special rules. So,
And I'm thinking by the time you get to the end of that orange, it's at least 150 feet. We don't have any trees that.
yeah, we're not gonna have any trees outside of this.
That was my question was,
Anyway.
does it, you get far enough out that you're okay, it's not a concern?
Yeah, it's a 3% glide slope that you're coming in on, so you imagine you're gaining quite a bit of altitude as you get out. I mean, out here, you're probably at an altitude out this far,
Where the bend
1,600
is, so.
to 1,000
Yeah, 'cause
feet
that's
above.
It's
100 feet right there.
Yeah, so, but we're past, we're not to that, so it's all right.
And there aren't any other benches anywhere else around there, just the one, I think.
And most of the residential area, if you look at projected in that map, is gonna be to the west end.
Okay. Do we want a motion to send this to public hearing?
That's,
Does anyone like to make that motion?
I moved to go to.
Okay, we have a motion from Rand to
I'll
take
say,
this in a second from Eric. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion approved. We'll get it set up for a public hearing and that'll probably be at our next meeting. Any other business?
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Only because I'm gonna be gone and I probably want to be there presenting.
You probably present it better than I could.
So,
Yes, we definitely
So-
want Brian here.
yeah, we may wait,
We'll
but I'll
make it
see
plan a public hearing when it's ready
okay,
and everybody's ready.
when we're ready, so. If that's possible, coordination. If that's okay. So, all right,
It'll be April, so May. Okay. Any other business? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Motion by Eric,
Second.
second by